Welcome to the Fire and Earth podcast with your hosts, Jason Mefford and Kathy Groover. Fire and Earth, giving you the keys to unlock your limitless potential.
Welcome to another episode of the Fire and Earth podcast. I'm your co-host, Jason Mefford.
And I am Kathy Groover. Well, Jason, that's not what I thought you were going to say. I thought you were going to say it in a different way, or I assumed that you might change it this time, or, I had an idea in my head of what was going to happen, and it didn't happen that way, and I don't even know what to do with that now.
You made assumptions about me, Kathy?
Yeah.
Shall I do it again? Welcome to the Fire and Earth podcast, right?
That's exactly what I thought you were going to do.
No.
We're joking about this, right? And actually, I knew that was exactly how you were going to do it, because that's how we do it every time. But I can't assume that. I mean, there have been times we've done it in a different way, or gotten silly, or whatever it is, or just
forgotten what I was
forgotten what
supposed
show
to
we're
say,
doing.
and you're looking at me like, "What the fuck?"
Or you said I'm Kathy Groover one day, which was hilarious. So, basically, what we're getting at here with all the silliness is I had a client situation. She had taken a job about 6 months ago. It looked like a really great fit. It got her out of a job that wasn't working for her, took her to a new country where she wanted to live. And once she got there, she realized the job was not working out for her. The work-life balance was non-existent. They expected her to work 10 to 12-hour days. If she left on time, she kind of got publicly shamed for it. People weren't talking to her. I mean, it was just a horrible situation. And she wanted to go. She needed to leave this job. But she had just gotten there. She just started this job. And about 4 months in, she happened to be looking through LinkedIn, and she saw a job that would be perfect for her. And she's like, "Oh, I can't apply. I just started this new job, and if I leave, they're going to kill me." And da 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 da. So she let it go. About a week later, that job sees her on LinkedIn, reaches out, interview. They offer her the job. And we were having our coaching session, and she said, "Kathy, I got to tell my boss on Monday that I'm quitting, and he's going to be so mad. He's going to tell me that he fought to have me there, and he's going to yell at me, and he's going to make my next 3 weeks hell." And she had all these ideas. And I said, "Okay, time out." I said, "You don't know what he's going to say." "Well, I know him really well." I said, "Nope." I said, "You do not know what he's going to say." I said, "Maybe he recognizes that you're unhappy and it's not a good fit. Maybe he can't stand having you there and he's happy to see you go. Maybe he's just mature enough to go, wow, I'm so excited for your opportunity." I said, "If he yells at you, first of all, it's a whole other set of problems and you go straight to HR. I said, this is a professional man, and I think you're judging this future situation." And she had all these assumptions. And the Monday comes, and I get an email in my inbox saying, "You are exactly right. He was so happy. He was excited for me for this opportunity. He wished me well, said, let's start getting things in order for you to go in 3 weeks. And I'm excited for you." So she had all this worry and all this fear and all this assumption. And one of my favorite Thich Nhat Hanh quotes is, "Why suffer twice? Why are we projecting into this future event that we don't know is going to happen, or we don't know how it's going to happen?" She drove herself crazy, assuming she knew how he was going to react. And in reality, he responded in a very mature, positive manner. So that's what we're talking about, is making these assumptions.
Well, and I think it's interesting because, I'm sure everybody who's listening, right? Do you really like to suffer? Right? Who out there listening wants to suffer? I don't think anybody, listening wants to suffer, unless you're a sadomasochist, and that's a whole nother thing. But that's not even.
And we already talked about that, actually.
Yeah, and that's not even really. That's how other people perceive it, but that's not how it actually is. But yeah, I mean, we don't like to suffer. But what's interesting too is as you're talking about it, the suffering that we do about making assumptions about the future, and the worry and the fear and everything else that goes on in it, that suffering is worse than anything that you experience usually when you actually go through it.
Absolutely.
Right? And so it's like, why suffer twice? You don't need to suffer twice, right? To begin with. And if you're going to suffer before the event and in the event,
and then after the event,
and then after the event, the magnitude is probably like this, right? like the suffering, if we take that, the total suffering for this particular event is a 10, let's say, right? Probably 6 or 7 of those suffering points are the assumptions, and you're getting in your head and getting wrapped around the axle before the event even.
Yep.
Maybe 1 or 2 for the event, and then do my math, whatever the rest of it is left over, right? And so it's like, well, why suffer all 10 points when you only have to do 2, right?
Yep.
If we would just stop making the assumptions, because most of the time we're wrong.
100%. What's those, having those unrealistic expectations of good stuff or bad stuff? And I remember we used to go to Busch Gardens every year. We'd go to Virginia Beach from Pittsburgh, and if it wasn't pouring down rain or hurricaning or whatever it did back in Virginia, we would go to Busch Gardens. And it was the year they opened the Loch Ness Monster, which was this crazy metal. It was one of the biggest roller coasters, and I was a total roller coaster fan when I was a kid. My mom didn't want to go, so my dad and I got in line, and the line was eternal, right? Because it was a brand new coaster and everyone wanted to ride it. And they had this recording playing in line. This is the world's fastest roller coaster, and you will hit speeds of 60 miles an hour. Started to scare the shit out of me, because all I heard for 45 minutes was, this is scary. This is scary. This is big. This is the fastest. This is the tallest. This is the drop. This is the loop-de-loops. This is the stuff that I had never experienced as a kid. And it was meant to jazz you up. What it did was scare the shit out of me. And I'm in line crying. Like, I don't want to go. We got to get out of line. And my dad's thinking, I just fucking wasted half an hour, kid.
We're paying.
So we finally get up to the line, and we get in the car, and I'm like, we do the roller coaster. I get off and I go, my dad's like, no. But it's like this build up and this I just got chills. This build up and this anticipation was so much worse than the actual thing, right? I mean, how many times did we, this is gonna be the greatest movie, and then you see it and you're like, oh, that was it. Oh. It's those expectations that are unmet on the good or the bad end. And it's all coming from here. It's our thoughts. It was that thought that got in my head of, this is scary, I'm going to die. This is the fastest thing ever. It was hearing that over and over again that built up this completely incorrect assumption in my brain. And then when I actually went through it, it was so fun. I wanted to do it again.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, how much of the time do we, I mean, and that example of the roller coaster is so relevant, right, to almost everything that we do. Right, we're all standing in a line to have certain experiences.
Yep.
And a lot of times there's an external loudspeaker, i.e., our friends, our family, the media, whatever, that's telling us what to expect. And usually it's all fear-based, and it's the worst, and all these different things. And so we're getting bombarded for the 30 to 45 minutes before you ever get on the fucking roller coaster.
Yep.
Right. And so a lot of that really is most of the suffering that's going on in our head, and the trepidation and the feeling worried, and the everything else about doing something, where it's like, just do it. Right. And here's a funny example. I can't even remember the movie, what it was called, but it was Mickey Rourke was in it, and it was kind of like vignettes. It was a movie, but there were like 10-15 minute things that were like stories of different people in different places in the world. Yeah,
like love story, like one of those.
A love story kind of thing, but with these little vignettes. And I remember this scene because it's kind of shocking, right? It's like he's in this bar, and this attractive woman comes up, and he's like, can I buy you a drink or whatever, some kind of little chit chat thing. And then it's like, how did he say it? Something like, so are we going to have sex or what? I mean, it was like something like that. It was just like very bold, right? That kind of comes out of his mouth. And she's like, how dare you? What do you mean? He's like, well, hey, I figure it's a 50-50 thing. You're either going to say yes or you're going to say no. And if you say yes, then we can get on with it quicker. If you say no, then I'm going somewhere else, right? That he didn't that character didn't try to build up the whole thing of,
Yeah.
oh, you got to like me, I got to woo her, I got to do everything else. And then at the end of the night, she
Finds out
says
it's a no.
no.
Yep.
Right. He's like, no, I want to know right now. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we can avoid some of that, because again, we don't know what people are going to say, but in that instance, she was either going to say yes or she was going to say no. And
Yep.
so why prolong the potential suffering?
Right.
Just get on with it.
Yeah. Well, and so much of that's perception, right? And it was so funny because I thought maybe you were going to refer to the same movie I had just written down, which would have been very crazy. But the movie Parenthood by Ron Howard, and it was Steve Martin, right? He played the dad, and the mom was like this carefree sort of like take it in stride, enjoy the crazy moments. And Steve Martin was this very anxious, very stressed out dad. And there was a scene at one point where one of the kids was supposed to be on stage doing the student play, and the daughter ran up on stage and started kicking them because she thought he was actually being hurt in the show. And they panned to Steve Martin and the wife, who I can't think of who played her, and it shows them like as if they're on a roller coaster, right? They're sitting in the theater seats, and they shot it as if they were going up a roller coaster, and she's laughing, and Steve Martin's going, and it just shows this dichotomy between the perception of these events and how Mary Steenburgen maybe was just so enjoying it, and she was just going with it, and she was enjoying the ride, and he was fighting it every way, every step of the way. And I remembered that of this, the standing in line for the roller coaster, and how do you want to perceive that? Can you reframe your nervousness and as excitement, because it's kind of two sides of the same coin, right? Mm-hmm. and not trying to project into this future that we don't know what the outcome is going to be. We never know the outcome of anything. No. We don't know what the outcome of this show is going to be. I don't know what the outcome of my clients are going to be today. I don't know if my car is going to start when I go out there. It's just everything is an unknown. And if we can just stay present, because I'm not going to sit here and worry about what if my car doesn't start. Well, why would I sit there and waste time on that?
No, and you can either, if you look at it, there's kind of three different options with it, right? You can sit and worry about it, which is what most people do. They try to think about the worst, scenario play for the worst things happening. You could instead, think about and spend your energy in kind of an excitement of looking forward to some anticipation for it, right? Which again, I think is better than the worrying, because at least you're in a better emotional state. But you also have the choice to just do it.
Yeah.
Don't think about it. Don't, just open your mouth and say it. And I know I'm guilty of this myself, right? Because there's sometimes I will, sit for a week, or a day, or whatever the time happens to be. Like, I need to have this conversation with this person. And so I'm kind of running it over in my head, right? Like, of all the different things that I might say. But why not just make it messy? It's like, how many people listening like rom-coms, right? And I'm sure all the women are going to be like, oh yes, I love them. And the guys are going to be like, oh, no, guys, we like them too, right? Because because especially when you're sitting with somebody special and they're watching it, they're feeling lovey, you're feeling lovey, it's great, right?
Yeah.
And even if you're by yourself, right? Like, I actually watched an old rom-com this last week by myself, right? But
look at you.
I know, look at me, right? But you can just make it messy and do it, because the thing is just saying something, at least you're doing something, right? And then you can always go from there.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and here's the other thing. So let's go back to my client, right? If she started to stress about, how am I going to tell my boss and he's going to be mad, and her stress level's already rising, right? So she's now going to go into this situation. She's not going to be as present. She's not going to be as eloquent. She's not going to be the best communicator she can be, because she's already in this fight or flight response, this heightened sensitivity to the stress. So let's say she doesn't communicate it well, so he doesn't take it well. You're sort of setting yourself up for not a great experience. Or let's say she was already so expectant of what he was going to say that she reacted to him in a way that made it even worse. To me, it's like as neutral as you can go into a situation. the easier. It's like a tennis player, right? You don't want to be all the way over there because where are they going to hit it over here? If you can be dancing in that moment and flexible in what your response is going to be, let's say he did get pissy with her. If she was already expecting that and already angry about it, that's going to be a call to security. She's going to lose her shit, as opposed to, wow, okay, you seem upset about this. I'm going to go. This is my 2 weeks, and thank you for listening. As opposed to maybe yelling back or getting defensive, or to me, it's like as neutral as we can go into a situation, and as eloquent as we can be speaking, which is going to be easier if we're not already in a stressed space.
Well, and that neutrality, I think, is interesting too, right? Because there's the whole other idea of attachment. And the less attached we can be to any outcome, again, a lot of times people use that when they're manifesting or trying to manifest certain things, but it's really for anything. If you're not attached to an outcome, then you don't have to defend anything either, right? And so what ends up happening is when you're making those assumptions, again, whether they're good, whether they're bad, right, you're kind of attaching to a particular outcome or assuming that there's going to be a particular outcome that happens. What if you just do it and just let the outcome be what it's going to be without attachment to it?
Yep.
Right. Then you're not making the assumptions. Then you're not having all that, the 6 or 7 of the 10 pain points before you ever even experience the event.
Yep.
Right. And it's the same thing with sometimes we feel like we have to psych ourselves up to do it. But again, what if you just do it? Don't psych yourself up. Just don't think about it. Just do it.
I have a fun story. So, so after I left my ex, I took a year and just had fun. I had never really dated. So it's like once people found out I was single, people who had been interested in me for a while, like came out of the woodwork, which was actually very flattering and something I needed at that time, right? Because I just felt like such shit when I left my marriage. And I called an old friend who I knew back in LA, like back in the day, like a long time ago. And I was like, hey, I saw it looked like he was single on Facebook, and we had always had a little attraction. So I messaged him and I'm like, hey, I'm going to be at the castle this weekend. Would love to see you and catch up. Do you want to join me? He goes, oh my God, absolutely. So we show up to the Magic Castle, and I'm dressed great and he looks amazing. And I hadn't seen him in like 20 plus years. And he said, oh, we're standing in line for a show. And he said, oh my God, how are you doing? So you're in Santa Barbara, you're married, you're doing massage. And I said, well, 2 of those is true. And he goes, oh, did you leave your ex? And I said, yeah, I did. And he goes, is this a date? And I said, you know what? If you want it to be a date, it is. If not, it's 2 friends hanging out. And he kisses me, and I went, I guess it's a date. And we started dating. But it was like, and he said, oh my God, I'm seeing someone, or, oh, I'm not really, I don't feel it. I would have been like, great, let's just hang out for the night and have a drink. I had no attachment to that outcome, but it was that bold action of, what the fuck? I'm going to text him and see if he wants to go to the castle, And that's what I learned in that year was taking bold action, not having an attachment to the outcome, because there were other people where I'm like, hey, would you like to go out? And they're like, no, not really. I'm like, okay, cool.
Move on.
I didn't take that as a rejection. I didn't take that as a failure. I took that as they're not rejecting me, they're rejecting my ask. And I think that's so important when we could have a whole one on rejection, but it's like not getting attached to that outcome was key. And again, had he said, oh, this can't be a date, I would have been like, cool, let's have a fun night. Yeah. So.
Well, that's a good way to kind of think about it too, right? Because again, you could have sat there, you kind of saw on Facebook, and you could have been like, oh, I don't know, he's probably with somebody else and nobody wants me, blah, 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 right? Well, like you said, the whole time he's sitting over there like, oh yeah, I still got the hots for Kathy. Right? And sometimes it just works out that way, right? I mean, it's that way in relationships a lot of times where, I mean, I know throughout my life, there's been different people that I've been attracted to, and maybe they've been attracted to me, but we were in different relationships at different times or whatever. And so the timing just never seemed to work out, which again is fine, but it did for you guys in that particular situation.
Yeah. So, and he very easily could have said no when I reached out and said, do you want to hang out at the castle? That could have been a no, in which case I also was not attached to that outcome. So yeah, it's about making these assumptions, and we know what assumptions do, and all that crap. So anyway, we talked long again today.
There we go.
There we go. We should go.
We should go. Yeah.
All right. Well, just go for it. Don't make assumptions. Enjoy the ride, and go in as neutral and positive as you possibly can. Easy. It's so simple, right? Yeah.
Easy peasy.
Easy peasy. Easy peasy. All right. I'm Kathy Gruber. I can be reached at kathygruber.com.
And I'm Jason Mefford. I can be reached at jasonmefford.com. So go out, quit making those assumptions. Just do something. And we'll see you on the next episode. See you later.
Yeah.